Roberta, I think we have everyone.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Very well, then I will go ahead and call the meeting of the Board of Public Utilities for the City of Santa Rosa to order. If we may have a roll call, please. Secretary Atha?
Yes, Chairman Galvin.
Here.
Vice Chair Arnone.
Here.
Board Member Badenford.
Here.
Board Member Grable.
Here.
Board Member Mullen.
Here.
Board Member Watts.
Here.
Board Member Wright.
Here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Secretary Atha, are you able to open up the Zoom so we can see each other? Great. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. First, I want to announce that the closed session that we had originally scheduled for today is going to be postponed, so there will be no closed session today. I want to remind the board members to please mute your phones or microphones when you're not speaking, and to please put away all personal computers and cell phones. Item number 2 is any statements of abstention by board members. Do we have any? Hearing none, that'll take care of that. There's no study session. The minutes for September 17th and October 6th were sent to you. Unless there's any objection, those will be received and entered. Hearing none. We're now taking public comments on the minutes. If you have any comments you wish to make, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in by telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Do we have anyone, Secretary Atha?
There are no comments at this time.
Thank you. That'll take
no
care of the
comments at this
minutes. We'll move now to item 5.1, staff briefing. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Item 5.1 is a staff briefing on our 2020-2021 capital improvement construction project update. And I'm pleased to introduce Lori Urbanik as our new Deputy Director of Water Engineering Resources. We are incredibly pleased to have Lori rejoin us in the Water Department. The board may know that prior to coming back to the Water Department as the Deputy Director of Engineering Resources, Lori was the Deputy Director over Capital Projects. So while a loss for the Capital Projects team, a great gain for the Water Department. So I'm going to turn it over to Lori, and she will introduce the rest of her team that are making the presentation today.
Thank you and welcome back, Lori.
Lori, you are on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
I'll start again. Jennifer, thank you for that nice introduction. And Chair Galvin, board members, it's a pleasure to be here again with you today. And today, as Jennifer mentioned, I'm Lori Urbanik, Deputy Director of Engineering for Water Resources. Not Water Resources, but I'm still getting used to my new title, so forgive me. And my new office and my new setup. So today I'm here joined by the supervising engineers, Tracy Duenas, Eric Robber, and Mark Cazaret. And we're gonna just give you a brief update of the construction projects that are in progress and about to be in progress since we last met in February. I'm sorry, Roberta, can you initiate the slideshow? Thank you. And can you go to the next slide, please? So today I will cover our recent accomplishments, such as the completed projects and projects that are in construction now, and a number of projects that will be in construction later this fiscal year. The supervising engineers will highlight a few of those key projects, and finally we'll provide an update on the construction of the Tubbs fire related projects. So given the number of adversities we've all been facing these last several months, along with others at the City of Santa Rosa, CIP quickly retooled our processes and we continued working safely and efficiently as the construction activities were the first phase of the restart after the initial shutdown due to COVID-19 in March. Since February, we have advertised 10 projects. Next slide, please. So this slide is just a breakdown of the projects that we've completed for a total of 6 projects estimated at about $5.2 million. The next 3 slides will identify those projects individually. Next slide, please. So we completed Gross El Camino Avenue, Augusta and Augustin Avenue sewer and water replacement, and also work on an urgent emergency Llano trunk repair that Tracy will talk about later in this project, in this presentation. Next slide, please. We completed Station 2 emergency generator replacement and the R9C tank decommissioning and demolition. Some of you may know that this tank was past its design life and was replaced by tank reservoirs 9A and 9B. Next slide, please. We also completed the Farmers Lane well rehabilitation project and the Oakmont Drive sewer main upsizing. The next, I will go over projects that are in construction or pending construction soon. Next slide, please. So we estimate that we'll have 34 projects in construction this fiscal year for a total construction dollar amount of $113 million. Many of these projects are already in construction currently. There are 13 that have already begun, and we have many more. Well, I should say that capital projects will have many more in construction ready to advertise this coming fiscal year, in this fiscal year. You will note that there's a pretty large segment of this distribution of cash that's shown here in this slide, and 47.8 million of that represent the UV project that will go into construction this fiscal year. Next slide, please. So these next several slides are going to list the projects that we have coming up, and there are a number of them, so I won't belabor going through each and every project, but you will notice that we have 6 regional projects that are currently in construction for a total of $5.4 million. And you'll notice that one of them, the Northerly slope protection at Delta Pond, that's bolded. And you'll notice that in the several next slides, some of the projects have bold text, and the supervising engineers will be talking about those later in the presentation. Next slide, please. There are 7 local projects in progress right now for a total estimated cost of approximately $17 million. Next slide, please. There are 4 additional regional projects that are in construction this fiscal year for a total estimated construction amount of $48.7 million. Next slide. We also anticipate initiating 17 local sewer and water projects this coming fiscal year. Such as the backup generator, as I mentioned earlier, that'll be highlighted later in this presentation. Next slide, please. This slide is just a continuation of that long list of local sewer and water projects that we expect to be in construction this fiscal year. Next slide, please. And here are the remaining projects that we anticipate being in construction in fiscal year 2021. And now I would like to turn it over to the supervising engineers to highlight some of their key projects, beginning with supervising engineer Tracy Duenas. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin, members of the board. So originally constructed in the early 1950s, the Matanza Siphon is comprised of an 8, 12, 18, and 24-inch parallel pipe system that traverses under the Matanzas Creek corridor. So the Rehabilitate Matanza Siphon project utilized trenches cured in place pipelining to improve this siphon system. So the original construction contract was awarded to SAK Construction for approximately $3.5 million and was substantially complete by end of November of 2019. The project involved extensive value engineering cost proposal for the required sewer bypass pumping work. The implementation of that value engineering reduced the overall construction cost by approximately $1.9 million, as well as eliminated the need for very elaborate temporary pipe bridge structure spanning the Matanzas Creek corridor for means of sewage conveyance. So if you recall back in March 2020, the board approved a change of scope contract change order to rehabilitate a section of an existing 60-inch Llano trunk line adjacent to the Llano Road and well outside the scopes of the original contract. So back in the winter of 2019, an observed sinkhole over the trunk elevated concerns of a potential trunk line and or road collapse. So this promptly triggered the need for additional inspection efforts that ultimately confirmed the existence of high levels of structural corrosion within the trunk. The assessment resulted in an emergency repair request by the department, and with staff's recommendation for continued use of SAK to perform the work was based solely on their qualifications, that they were still under contract, mobilized, and that the contract had sufficient funds available, provided the net savings gain from the value engineering efforts. Repair was substantially complete by the end of April 2020, and with consideration to the value engineering credit, the extra work costs for the added Llano trunk repair efforts, final construction cost came in at approximately $2.3 million. Roberta, next slide, please. So originally constructed in the 1980s, Delta Pond stores tertiary treated recycled water conveyed from the plant. It is operated and maintained as part of the regional water use system. Given its size and capacity, the facility is also under the jurisdiction of the State of California Division of Safety of Dams. So the Northerly Slope Protection Delta Pond project rehabilitated approximately 5,100 linear feet of the northerly interior embankment section of the pond. The work consisted of mass undertaking of removal and replacement of approximately 2.5 feet of failed slope material, mass grading project. And it also installed an additional layer of rock riprap for purposes of future protection against wave erosion and vegetation. So given the operational constraints related to the required use and needing the pond for during wet season, contract specified construction over 2 seasons in order to minimize operational and customer impacts relative to completing the work on time. So back in May of 2020, this year, the board approved the contract to Granite Construction. July, a notice to proceed was issued, and Granite proceeded with an extremely high level and efficient means of modes, resulting in completing the work well in advance of the proposed schedule. So given their progress, Grant proceeded with requesting, and the city approved completing both phases this year with the ultimate condition that it would be completed prior to wet weather. As of now, substantial completion is estimated in 2 weeks' time. Final construction cost for that project is estimated to be approximately $3.3 million. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eric.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin, board members. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to describe the upcoming North Trunk Sewer Replacement Project to the board today. The North Trunk Sewer is a primary trunk sewer serving a large portion of northeast Santa Rosa. It's accessed from Chenate Road, Parker Hill Road, and Terra Linda Drive. The project consists of installing approximately 2,200 feet of sewer trunk and approximately 3,600 feet of sewer collector pipe. It moves the old sewer lines away from Pauling Creek, reducing maintenance costs and reducing potential sewer overflows and creek impacts. An innovative traffic control plan designed by City Traffic Engineering and the Fire Department will minimize traffic disruptions caused by pipeline construction. Modern trenchless technology will be utilized to install new sewer line up to 37 feet deep beneath Sinead Road that will reduce construction costs and neighborhood disruptions. Another component of the project are new water mains in Sinead Road and Lomitas Avenue, which will loop existing systems together, improving system performance and reducing maintenance costs. On October 13th, bids were received with a low bid at approximately $9 million, which is about 17% or nearly $2 million under the engineer's estimate. Construction is anticipated to commence in July 2021. It'll take approximately 2 years to complete. The city has also created a web page to inform the public on the project progress, including upcoming traffic control changes. They can be accessed at www.sineadsewerproject, all one word, .com. Next slide, please, Roberta. I'd also like to highlight the ongoing R7 access stabilization repairs project. This project will stabilize an existing access road serving water reservoir tank R7. The improvements will consist of stabilizing approximately 800 lineal feet of roadway cut slopes, installing approximately 2,000 linear feet of HDPE storm drain line within the access road and within portions of Yerba Buena Road and St. Francis Roads up in northeast Santa Rosa, and reconstructing approximately 1,200 lineal feet of the access road. These improvements are necessary to mitigate ongoing slope instability issues and drainage issues impacting the existing access road and downslope residents. The project was advertised in January 2020. Bids were received in February. The low bid of $1.5 million, which was about 8.5% below the engineer's estimate. Construction began in July 2020, and we anticipate it will be completed by the end of this year. This time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin and members of the board. I'm excited to be presenting the rest of our highlights for this CIP update. And I'll be starting with the Llano Trunk and Glenbrook Siphon lining project. We completed both phases of Llano's sewer trunk lining project. The first phase lining the Glenbrook Siphon. And as Tracy pointed out, there was that emergency project to rehabilitate the Matanzas Creek Siphon. The Glenbrook Siphon is essentially the sister siphon to Matanzas, and the condition was quite similar and very poor in some locations. As you can see in the photo to the left, indicated by the rebar, the exposed rebar showing. We were able to successfully line this, and we're thrilled with the results, as you can see on the photo to the right. Last week, we just completed the second phase of this project, which lined approximately 3,800 linear feet of 54-inch concrete pipe along West 3rd. The bypass system was shut down as of Saturday, and we have begun breaking down the bypass piping as I speak. We anticipate completing the project within about 2 weeks. And as I'm sure you know, lining projects tend to be a higher risk. They tend to be impactful to city residents, and this was a very successful project, and we are excited to be completing this $6 million project. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to Mayacamas. Mayacamas Pump Station is the 4th pump station along the Geysers pipeline. It's a critical facility, moving an average of about 12.5 million gallons of recycled water per day. It is actually built on a wildlife sanctuary held by the Madrone Audubon Society and is also held by a conservation easement held by Sonoma County Agricultural and Open Space District. The station was constructed with a living roof some 20 years ago and has since begun to leak. So this roof project was brought to CIP in late November of last year, and we have since developed plans. We've coordinated with both outside agencies, and we've also advertised the project. So we anticipate construction will begin next month. So we're very excited about that as well. Next slide, please. The Laguna Treatment Plant's Disinfection Improvements Project is an exciting solution to the plant's need for greater system capacity, reliability, as well as operational control. This project has been a substantial effort since 2012, and we will be approaching construction soon. Next month, I anticipate bringing 3 items before the board for consideration, including an approval of an addendum to the Incremental Recycled Water Program Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, as well as 2 contract documents, essentially professional services for engineering services related to construction. As we've previously mentioned, the construction cost is estimated at $47 million. And beginning construction summer next year, we anticipate completion of this important project by end of calendar year 2023. So we do anticipate a 2 to 3 year period for construction. Next slide, please. Another interesting project we're making good headway on is the backup generator project for various water and wastewater facilities. So following the 2017 Tubbs fire, we evaluated emergency infrastructures with the need to increase resiliency in future disasters. So armed with lessons learned, we applied for FEMA funds to replace generators at water and wastewater pumping facilities. And those funds were awarded by FEMA November of last year. Those funds are part of the hazard mitigation grants, and they provide about 75% of certain costs, including design and construction, with a maximum reimbursement amount for this project of $3.5 million. This year, we've begun design for replacement of systems at 18 sites around the city. And Station 15, we are currently in construction, and so the replacement for the generator at this station was included in the original application, but due to the project being well ahead of others, has since been removed from the grants. And this helps facilitate more rapid completion of our construction project and allows for continuity of critical water operations. But for the majority of the sites, however, we do expect to complete design early next year, and with construction starting in the summer of 2021. We anticipate completion of construction, project closeout, and grant closeout by November 2022. Next slide, please. So I'll be briefly touching on our public assistance projects as related to the 2017 Tubbs fire. I'm also pleased to mention that we advertised 2 more utility projects related to this Tubbs fire. These 2 CIP projects combine a total of 5 FEMA utility projects to realize some efficiencies with construction administration, as well as bidding and general project delivery. So we're essentially seeing an economy of scale by not having to administer 5 separate CIP projects. And those 2 CIP projects I mentioned are Skyfarm A and Hansford Court Sewer Lift Station Reconstruction Project, and fire-related repairs of utility stations project. Next slide, please. So briefly touching on both, the Skyfarm A and Hansford Court Sewer Lift Station project reconstructs 2 sewer lift stations that were completely destroyed by the fire. This comes at a cost of $3.4 million, and we anticipate completion of construction summer next year. And next slide, please. And then the other project, fire-related repairs of utility stations, is essentially is intended to repair various damages observed by the Tubbs fire at various water department facilities. Most of the damage was perimeter fencing, some minor water appurtenances such as irrigation, backflow preventers, water meter boxes at these stations. And there was one generator as well that was completely destroyed at the sewer lift station on Stagecoach Road in Fountain Grove. So this project comes at a cost of $1.4 million, and it too is slated for completion summer of 2021. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Lori for final comments.
Thank you, Mark, and we're happy to entertain any questions that the board members may have.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director Urbanik and the supervising engineers. Any board member questions?
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Okay, on the UV project, you said 47 million. Is that only the city portion, or is that the entire regional system?
Deputy Director Urbanik may be best to answer that. That's the total construction cost. I don't actually know how it gets broken down to the different regional partners, but I do know that we are anticipating funding from those partners for this project. Is that correct?
Yes.
The director would answer that question.
So yeah, roughly 75% will come from Santa Rosa funds, and then the rest will be split among the sub-regional partners per the agreement. So that's the total construction cost, and then it'll be split among the partners.
So it seems to me that it's actually less expensive than we originally thought a year ago or 6 months ago or whatever it is. I don't know. I thought we were borrowing 60 million. That's my question.
Got it. And Mark, I don't know if you want to address that, but the UV project, there's also diversion facilities and other pieces of that project. So the total estimate for the replacement and what we need to bond for is up to 70 million. And then we are looking at the potential to provide some cash either from Santa Rosa or others that might reduce that amount down. But we want to make sure that we are putting out a bond for the entire amount that we may need. So if we can bond for less, that is our plan.
Thank you.
And if I may as well elaborate, as Director Burke was mentioning, there are two key systems. There's the UV system and the diversion system. That 47 million is attributed to construction only for both of those systems. So diversion is estimated at about 12 million, and the UV portion is estimated at about 35 million for a total of 47. However, there are also project delivery costs associated with the total project. That's estimated, as I will be reporting to the board next month, it's estimated at about 35%, which was our original estimate back in 2019, which I'm happy to report. And so we're estimating a total project, which is design, construction management, in-house labor and overhead, everything associated with the project, at roughly 64 million.
I have a question.
Any other board member?
Yeah, yes.
Questions or comments? Vice Chair Roney?
I noticed that in 2020 we have 6 projects listed, and in 2021 we have 34 projects listed. And I guess my question is the 2020 number the remaining projects, or was that the total number of projects? And if that's the total number of projects, why such a big disparity between the 2 construction years?
I'll try to answer that. So reporting out on progress for construction projects has always been challenging for us because we budget based on a fiscal year. Our work actually makes sense to us on a more of a calendar year. And so we were trying to keep it all, when we last reported, we were reporting on the prior fiscal year, what we anticipated coming forward from that fiscal year through January and into this fiscal year. And now the 35 that are coming up are additional projects. So we checked in on the ones that we mentioned were in progress in February. We wanted to close the door on those, let you know those were completed. And here's what we're anticipating going into construction for this fiscal year that started in July, which is 2021. So again, I apologize for the confusion. It is a little bit confusing, but I think the takeaway here is that the team has done an amazing job. I'm very proud of everyone in the division for all their hard work and the support that we've received from Assistant City Manager Jason Nutt and Director Burke. So it's been a very challenging year, but I would say that one of our more successful, given all the challenges. We were very successful in pushing out a large number of projects.
Very impressive. Thank you.
Welcome.
Board Member Mullen, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to second the comment about the scope and layout of the proposed and ongoing capital projects. It's a very ambitious plan and one that is hopefully achievable under these trying conditions, because in between doing all this, we're reacting to wildfires and outages and all of the other challenges that come forward. So I commend the staff for both on the regional side and on the city side, and the fact that they look at the city as a whole and they pick quadrants to do upgrades and replacement projects to improve the service so that the whole city benefits from that. I think that's a very commendable approach on that. I had one question relative to the Delta Pond. Watching and seeing the scope of that project, it's a very large project. And the reason I'm asking this is a few months back, we got accused of getting the cart before the horse on the Delta project when we were approached by the ag users about why are we going forward at this time. And when you see the presentation we just saw with the scope and the timing and the length of time for a project of that magnitude, it looks like we're right in the sweet spot. And so again, I commend the staff for the planning process and getting it teed up to be able to go forward at the appropriate time so that we can power through and complete that project within our own timeline. So I just wanted to call out that single project there, because I thought it's a great example of the planning and the work staff's put into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Mullen. Any other board member questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I'll now take public comments on item 5.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Etha, do we have anyone?
No comments at this time.
Thank you. Thank you again, Deputy Director Urbanik and the supervising engineers. It's great to get those updates and see all those projects that are coming out of the ground, and keep up the good work. We'll now move to point 2. If nobody wishes to pull either of them, I'll take a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Arnone, seconded by Board Member Wright. We will now take public comments on items 6.1 and 6.2. If you have any comments, you would please raise your hand or dial *9. Do we have any?
See no comments at this time.
Thank you. If you will now do a roll call vote, please, Secretary Etha.
Yes. Chairman Galvin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
Board Member Badenford?
Aye.
Board Member Grable?
Aye.
Board Member Mullen?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Very good. Passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move to item 7.1. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Item 7.1 is adoption of a mitigated negative declaration addendum and a mitigation monitoring and reporting program and project approval for the Cobblestone Drive Zone R2, R4 water main connection. And Associate Civil Engineer Andy Wilt and Justin Witt with Brelgian Race will be making the presentation.
Roberta, can we have the slides, please?
Yes, and Andy, you and Justin both should share your video too, please.
Yes, let's figure this out. Here we go. There we are. Is Justin dialed in? Yes.
Yes, sir, Andy.
Okay, here we go. So good afternoon, Chair Galvin and members of the board. I'm Andy Wilt, civil engineer with Public Works. I'm presenting with Justin Witt, environmental planner from Railroad Race. We'll be discussing the Cobblestone Drive R2R4 water main connection project, mitigated negative declaration. Next slide, please. So first, I'll go over the project background, and then Justin will discuss the CEQA, and then we'll provide the recommendation. Next slide, please, Roberta. So the water master plan that was updated by West Yos in 2014 identified 7 fire hydrants serving the Cobblestone Drive area to be fire flow deficient. Next slide, please. So the black oval on this graphic encapsulates the Cobblestone Drive area, which is located just north of the former Sinead Hospital. The 7 fire hydrants are shown as red dots. Those are all fire flow deficient under the existing conditions per the modeling that was completed as part of the water master plan update. To resolve the fire flow deficiency, the water master plan recommended upsizing the existing water pipes, shown in this graphic as the thick blue lines. It's approximately 8,400 linear feet. Next slide, please. So since the water master plan update was completed, several alternatives to resolve the fire flow deficiencies have been evaluated. First, the water master plan suggested replacing the existing pipes in Cobblestone Drive and Sinead Road as shown on the previous slide. The next alternative was installing a new pipeline from Tillmont Way to Cobblestone. That's approximately 1,200 linear feet, so significantly less footage than the project that was identified in the water master plan. The last alternative was to replace and upsize the existing AC pipes from Andy Way behind the Sinead Hospital through an existing easement to Cobblestone and then up Cobblestone to the highest fire hydrant. And that's approximately 2,000 linear feet. Next slide, please. So this graphic shows the alternatives that were considered. First, the same blue line that we saw on the earlier slide representing the proposed project from the water master plan. The thick black line shows the next alternative. That's in the upper left quadrant there. And that goes from Tillmont Way, which is pressure zone R2, across private property to Cobblestone, which is pressure zone R4. So just below that, there's a dashed purple line. That's the last alternative, which was to replace the existing 40-year-old AC pipe with larger diameter pipe from Andy Way through an existing easement behind the Sinead Hospital and then up Cobblestone to that highest fire hydrant as shown there. Next slide, please. So the first alternative from the water master plan was eliminated early due to its high cost. Then a life cycle cost analysis on the remaining 2 alternatives concluded that the remaining alternatives were approximately equal. This assumes, of course, that the environmental impacts are equal as well. So the alternative to install a new pipeline from Tillmont Way to Cobblestone through the private property was selected due to easier operation. It has fewer pressure reducing valves to maintain and to operate. So approximately 48 households would have improved fire flow from this project. A recent cost estimate shows the total estimated project cost to be approximately $800,000 or $16,700 per household. Next slide, please. So the selected alternative requires the acquisition of 2 easements. The first easement is located at the northern side of an undeveloped property at 3600 Tillmont Way. It's a residential property. This easement would be in the building setback area, so it would not prevent development. The second easement would be located across Keysight Technologies property. We had brief discussions with both property owners, so they're aware of the project. Next slide, please. Okay, so this graphic shows the preferred alternative. Connect to the pressure zone R2 at Tillmont Way, which is the upper left of that graphic. The blue line represents the new pipe, and the yellow rectangle highlights the property lines at 3600 Tillmont Way. So the new pipe is in the setback area, so it does not impact the building envelope. Pipe then runs across Keysight property through a corridor selected in consideration of minimizing impacts to trees, and then south out a city fire access road to Cobblestone Drive, which is in zone R4. Next slide, please. So I'll show a few photos to provide an idea as to what this landscape looks like. This photo here looks across 3600 Tillmont Way, looking east. The blue arrow represents the proposed water line. So it will progress several feet to the right of an existing concrete swale that is located on the adjacent property to the north. And as you can see in this photo, some tree pruning may be necessary to facilitate installation. Next slide, please. So this photo shows the approximate location of the water main as it heads south across the grassland on Keysight property, adjacent to the fence. 3600 Tillmont Way property is on the right side of the fence. Next slide, please. So here, the pipeline would then progress kind of southeast across Keysight and through some trees. So more tree pruning may be necessary. Next slide, please. So to discuss the CEQA in more detail, Justin Witt, environmental planner from Braille J. Race. Justin, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin and members of the board. I'm Justin Witt with Braille J. Race. I worked on the CEQA process with Andy, who provided all the engineering expertise, along with a couple other engineers from our office. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to run you through the CEQA process that was followed for the Cobblestone project. As many of you likely know, the purpose of CEQA is public disclosure primarily of projects in the public sphere, as well as disclosing the potential impacts that are associated with those projects. It also allows the city the opportunity to identify and develop mitigation measures to reduce the severity of environmental impacts. There are 3 levels of review under CEQA. We kind of went with the middle level for this project, the initial study level. Next slide, please. So we prepared the initial study in June 21st, 2019. And after that was prepared, we went through the 30-day CEQA required public review period. For this project, it ran June 21st through July 22nd, 2019, after which we would respond to all comments received. There were 2 issues that came up after the public review period had closed that sort of were a little unique to this process. I'll discuss them more in detail briefly later. But in summary, they were related to the CEQA guidelines amendments changing in 2019, as well as the identification of a couple of small project additions. So today's presentation is for the purpose of adoption of the mitigated negative declaration. And if we succeed with that recommendation, we would then go forward and file the notice of determination and conclude the CEQA process. Next slide, please. So the Cobblestone Environmental Review identified several potentially significant construction-related impacts that are all pretty germane to a project of this nature. And they can all be mitigated to a level of less than significant. Just briefly, those are construction-related dust, erosion, the potential for accidental discovery of archaeological or historical resources, construction-related noise, construction-related spills, and the access issues that Andy touched on earlier. Next slide, please. So during the initial study preparation process, we prepared a biological resources assessment, a tree assessment, and a cultural resources assessment. The cultural resources assessment did not identify any known documented resources and did not discover any during the field work. The tree assessment identified 55 trees that were within the preliminary alignment. So the engineering team looked at realigning it in a slight way to avoid as many of those as they could, and were successful. Only one 7.5-inch coast live oak would be removed. This is not a heritage oak tree. It's smaller than the 18-inch size that would qualify it as such. And because of that, and because it is a public works project, it does not conflict with the tree ordinance, so there's no impact on that. Due to the kind of well-treed nature of the site, we needed to do pre-construction nesting bird and roosting bat surveys prior to constructing the project to ensure that we don't harm or otherwise discourage nesting birds or roosting bats. The biological analysis identified 6 special status plants that may be present. None of those are on the state or federal Endangered Species Act, but they are on the California Native Plant Society list, so are therefore granted special status under CEQA. To mitigate for that, we would do a pre-construction survey. If the plants are found to be present, we would move them to a different location under the review of a biologist. And finally, there is an ephemeral drainage, the swale that Andy pointed out, that runs perpendicular to the proposed pipeline alignment. This is not likely a Army Corps of Engineers jurisdictional feature, but it may well be jurisdictional under the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So 2 alternatives are to avoid the feature with trenchless technologies, which would probably be complicated by the rocky soils, or to go through the permitting process and comply with those permit terms. So next slide, please. So back to the public review. The project did have the 30-day CEQA required public review process. As I said, it ran June 21st to July 22nd, 2019. The notice was published in the Press Democrat at the county clerk. In addition, the project was sent to the state clearinghouse. Sorry, the initial study was sent to the state clearinghouse, which started a 30-day concurrent state agency review process. The notice was mailed to owners within 500 feet of the project extents. And copies of the initial study were made available on the city's Transportation and Public Works website, as well as the physical office. Next slide, please. As part of CEQA these days, we need to engage in tribal consultation as required by AB 52. We did this during the development of the initial study so that we could capture any required consultation within that document. The city mailed requests to 7 tribes, the largest 2 being the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria and the Lytton Rancheria. We did not receive any requests for further consultation from any of that contact. However, the Federated Indians did request a modification to the accidental discovery mitigation, wherein they would be included as the contact. So we did accommodate that request, and it's reflected both in the initial study as well as the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. Next slide, please. As I said earlier, no comments were received from the state or from the public in the project location. We did, however, prepare a response to comments to essentially summarize the fact that no comments were received and document how the project was noticed. The initial study concluded that with the incorporation of mitigation measures, the project would not cause significant environmental effects. Next slide, please. So the first sort of anomaly to this otherwise standard review process was the revision of the CEQA guidelines. The state amended the guidelines and they became effective May 1st, 2019. So we prepared a memorandum to conform the 2019 initial study to those guidelines that was prepared in January 2020. It essentially went through all of the checklist items, including the new energy and wildfire sections, and did not find any new impacts or mitigation measures that would be required that were not identified in the original initial study. So those original findings remain valid. And confirming the initial study to the new guidelines, it did not result in any substantial revision, which is the threshold for requiring recirculation. So just to clarify, recirculation was not required because there was no substantial revision. Next slide, please. And then the second complication was in February 2020, the city identified approximately 190 feet of additional pipeline that needed to be brought into the project. This would have been categorically exempt had it been on its own, but it was part of the overall project, so therefore needed to be brought into the CEQA analysis. So to do that, we prepared an addendum to the initial study in April of 2020. Similar to the memorandum, all checklist items were assessed, no new impacts were found, and no mitigation, no additional mitigation was required. Essentially, the new pipeline construction impacts were very similar to those of the original project, so the mitigation that was already identified would cover that as well. So again, the substantial revision threshold was not met, so circulation was not required. Both the memorandum and the addendum were vetted by the city's attorney's office, and the findings of the initial study remain valid. And that concludes the CEQA portion of this presentation, so I'd like to return it back to Andy. Thank you.
Roberta, next slide, please. So the recommendation is recommended by Transportation and Public Works Department and the Water Department that the board by resolution adopt the MND and associated addendum for the Cobblestone Drive Zone R2R4 Water Main Connection Project, adopt the MMRP for the project, approve the project, and direct staff to file the notice of determination. Are there any questions that Justin or I can answer?
Thank you, Andrew and Justin, for your presentations. I'll open it up now for any board member questions or comments. We could get our screen back. Thank you. Any board member questions or comments? Hearing none and seeing none, we're now going to take public comments on item 7.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please do so by raising your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9. Do we have any comments?
There are no comments at this time.
Then I will entertain a motion.
I'll move that the board adopt the mitigated negative deck and associated addendums and approve the project, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and direct staff to file a notice of determination for the project.
I'll second.
That was a motion by Board Member Wright, seconded by Board Member Watts to approve item 7.1. May we have a roll call, please, Secretary Atha?
Yes, Chairman Galvin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
Board Member Badenfort?
Aye.
Board Member Grable? Board Member Grable? Board Member Mullen?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Board Member Grable, are you with us?
Looks like he's muted.
That concludes the roll call vote.
Okay, Board Member Graybull, last chance to vote.
Hi, my unmute button is not cooperating. Sorry.
Was that an aye?
Yes, aye.
Thank you very much. Passes unanimously. That'll take care of item 7.1. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. We'll now move to item 7.2. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin, members of the board. Item 7.2 is the recommendation to authorize issuance of wastewater revenue bonds. I did just want to note that this has been an incredible amount of work in a very short time frame, and I do want to really thank the team for everything they did, including earlier today with a presentation for the credit rating, which went extremely well. And I would like to introduce Deputy Director Zunino, as well as Sarah Hollenbach from our PFM Financial Advisors will be making the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chairman Galvin and members of the board. Today we are seeking a recommendation from the board to the City Council to approve a maximum $70 million bond issuance. However, as Director Burke mentioned earlier, we are expecting that the total bond amount will be less when we go to the bond market. Would you go to the next slide, Roberta, please? So during this process, we also recognized an opportunity to do an advanced refunding of an older series of bonds. And I will not steal Sarah's thunder and let her give you the good news on that piece of information. But what it will do is it will create the opportunity for us to release some reserves that may also be applied to the bond or to the project and reduce the total of the bond. I would also like to just take an opportunity to really thank the team. You have seen with your agendas and the packets that were submitted that very complicated documentation has been created in a very expedited timeline, which took a lot of hard work from both staff and our consultants. And I just want to say thank you for all of that work that has been completed to this point. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to our financial advisor, Sarah Hollenbeck, the managing partner from PFM. She will also have available to you for any questions our bond counsel, which is Chris Lynch from Jones Hall, and the head of our underwriting team, Eileen Gallagher from Stiefel. And I will also be available for any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Kimberly, and Chair Galvin and board members. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I hope you can hear me okay. Great. Thank you. So if we could move to, let's move to the next slide. Kimberly gave a good overview of what we're here to talk about today. And just to frame the opportunity, as was discussed, interest rates are at but very near to all-time lows. So we do have two components to the financing being proposed to you this afternoon. There is the borrowing that will fund the UV project that was described, and that would be new money financing, which would be borrowed in the tax-exempt bond market. And so what we're showing you here on this slide is the current tax-exempt municipal market conditions. And as you can see, there's a lot of information on this chart, but what it's trying to tell you and what you can see in the bullet point is essentially what you're being told here is that where rates are today, they have been lower than current levels almost 1% of the time since 1993 when they created this index. And what we're tracking here is called the MMD index, the Municipal Market Data Index, which is the benchmark that we use in the tax-exempt market, similar to the way, and as we'll talk about on the next slide, people look at U.S. Treasury bonds as sort of the benchmark rate that they reference in the taxable market. So what you're seeing here is the actual level of yields on the right-hand side in the red, and then the percentage of the time between 0 and 1.2% is our scale on the blue. So the blue bars are showing how frequently rates are lower than today since 1993. So those are all very low levels. And what that's telling you is if you have a project you need to borrow for, this is a really good time to be doing it. Next slide, please. Because we also have, as Kimberly mentioned, an opportunity that's created by the very attractive level of rates to refinance about 50 million of the outstanding 2012 bonds. Those bonds have to be issued on a taxable basis, and there's some complicated tax law reasons for that, but it has to do with the fact that some of those bonds actually were issued to refinance bonds previously, and you can't do that twice. So this would be done in the taxable market, but even so, the level of treasury rates is so attractive that you can do this and still generate savings, even though you're refinancing tax-exempt bonds with taxable bonds. And so this is just showing you some of the spots on the yield curve today and where they were a year ago. So you can see at the time this chart was created, the 10-year treasury bond was yielding 0.7%, so 70 basis points, which is a pretty attractive level. And a year ago, it was somewhere up towards 1.5%. So maybe one of the only good things that's come out of this pandemic is that as a borrower, the interest rate market is extremely attractive and favorable. If we could go to the next slide, unless there are any questions here. Okay, great. So this is describing the first of the two series I talked about, the proposed tax-exempt Series 2020A. As it was mentioned earlier in the discussion of some of the capital projects, the proposed maximum borrowing amount that's being authorized is about 70 million, but we're really only expecting to need to issue about $57 million in principal, and that will go toward the UB project to the extent that some of the partners determine to contribute cash, and to the extent the city does so as well, this number will change. But we're expecting as of now about 57 million to fund the $70 million project. And the reason that you can borrow less and actually fund a larger project than even the bond size you're issuing is because right now investors are purchasing bonds at a premium. So in other words, they're paying you more than 100 cents on the dollar to buy the bonds from you. The expected release from the reserve fund, as I mentioned, is currently about $4.5 million. And we're expecting an all-in true interest cost, which essentially is a bond math jargon way of saying effective borrowing rate, is expected to be just over 3%, which would result in average annual debt service over the 30 years of the borrowing of about $3.5 million. So not a bad rate for 30-year borrowing. If there are no questions here, we can move on to the next slide. So this is just a little more detail on the proposed refinancing. As I mentioned, Series 2012A is outstanding in just over $50 million, and those bonds can be refinanced, we project, in the current market in an effort to generate debt service savings. We expect that net present value savings, as of the date we ran these numbers, about $6.8 million. And these bonds are mature through 2034. So it would be average annual cash flow savings of about $560,000. So it's a pretty good opportunity. For reference, the benchmark in the industry that is commonly used to determine whether a refinancing is sort of worth pursuing is 3% NPV savings, and here you're at just over 13%. So it's a pretty attractive opportunity. On to the next slide. So as Kimberly mentioned, we did have a presentation with Standard & Poor's this morning. And I would commend the city team who worked tirelessly to put together that presentation, and both Director Burke and Kimberly for doing an incredibly impressive job conveying what a well-run and well-resourced organization you have, and what a great job you do taking care of all the facilities you manage, and doing it at rates that the ratepayers can afford to do. So all of those aspects are things that S&P looks at when they consider a credit rating, and we fully expect that the rating of which is AA currently, will be affirmed. So we did that today. We expect to receive the rating the week of November 2nd, and then would price the bonds looking at currently the week of November 16th. As it was mentioned, we do have representatives of Jones Hall as well as Stiefel on the line in case there are questions that are legal in nature, or you want more color on the market from lead underwriter on the financing. To the next slide. So what's being asked of you is to recommend to the City Council that they take certain actions. There would be resolution authorizing staff to proceed forward with the transaction subject to certain parameters, which the financings would need to meet to move forward. The maximum par amount on the new borrowing, the Series 2020A tax-exempt borrowing, would be $70 million. The amount authorized, the maximum amount authorized for Series 2020B, which is the refinancing, would be $60 million. The resolution sets forth a minimum savings threshold of 3% NPV for the refinancing. As I mentioned, we're currently looking at something well above that. The underwriter's discount would be not to exceed 0.5%. And then there are a host of documents, which I believe you probably have in your packet, which are the documents Kimberly was referring to, that the team has worked hard to put together: an indenture, a continuing disclosure certificate, a preliminary official statement, which is essentially the offering memorandum. That's the key document that investors review to understand your credit and what the key attributes of the bonds are in making a purchasing decision. And that has been a great effort on the part of Jennifer, Kimberly, Nick Harvey, Emma Watson, and others to pull together all the information about your systems and the city. And then a bond purchase agreement, which is the agreement you enter into with Stiefel, the underwriter, to sell them the bonds, which they then turn around and place with investors, and an escrow agreement, which essentially governs the funds held by the trustee until the 2012 bonds are called. So happy to take any questions on that, or we can move to the final slide, which is the recommendation. And I think Kimberly was going to bring that one home for us.
All right, if no further questions yet, it is recommended by the Finance Department and the Water Department that the Board of Public Utilities, by resolution, recommend that the City Council authorize the issuance of wastewater revenue bonds Series 2020A to the capital improvement projects of the wastewater system and wastewater revenue refunding bonds Series 2020B to redeem certain outstanding wastewater revenue bonds for debt service savings, which are federally taxable. The 2020B bonds collectively with the 2020A bonds will be the 2020 bonds and all related actions necessary to carry out the issuance.
Thank you to both you ladies for the presentation. I'll open it up now for any board member questions or comments. Vice Chair Arnone.
Yes, thank you. I have a question on slides 5 and 6. You summarized the two different components of this refinancing and described the all-in true interest cost for those two components. And it looks like we're paying more interest for the tax-exempt money than for the taxable money. And I don't quite understand that. I mean, it looks to me like the tax-exempt interest we're paying is 3.11, and the taxable interest we're paying is 2.26, and that seems the opposite of what it would intuitively seem to me.
That's a great observation, and thank you for pointing that out. I should have explained why that is. You're absolutely right that based on the numbers we're showing you, the estimated sort of effective borrowing rate for Series 2020A is 3.1%, and that the contrarily the taxable bonds do have a expected borrowing rate of 2.2% approximately. The only reason, and that is counterintuitive, certainly you would expect tax-exempt bonds to carry a lower rate. The reason for that, and I should have pointed this out, is that we're expecting that the refinancing of the 2012 bonds will be repaid within the same final amortization that is existing on the 2012 bonds, and that only goes out to 2034. And so it's a shorter term for the taxable bonds. Conversely, the 2020A bonds are expected to be 30-year bonds. So certainly if they were both 30-year bonds, you would expect the taxable bonds to have a higher rate, and that would be the case even in this market. And I'm sorry, I didn't explain that clearly when we went through them. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you, that explains it.
Thank you. Other board member questions or comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Trying to find the resolution. Okay, so I'll make a motion of resolution of the Board of Public Utilities recommending that the City Council authorize the issuance and sale of Santa Rosa Series 2020A and City of Santa Rosa wastewater revenue for funding bond Series 2020B, federally taxable, refinancing of all or a portion of the outstanding City of Santa Rosa wastewater revenue refunding bonds Series 2012A, and waive the reading of the text.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Arnone and a second by Board Member Watts. At this point, I will open it up for public comments. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha, do we have anyone?
No comments at this time, Chair.
Thank you. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Galvin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
Board Member Badenford?
Aye.
Board Member Grable?
Aye.
Board Member Mullen?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Great, passes unanimously. Thank you to everyone, Kimberly, Sarah, and all staff. It sounds like you had a very productive meeting this morning, and we appreciate all your hard work. This will definitely save the city a lot of money and allow us to get that UV system up and running. So thank you very much. We'll now move to item number 8, which is public comments on non-agenda items. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha, do we have anyone?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, that'll take care of item number 8. We have no referrals. We have no written communications. Do we have any subcommittee reports? Board Member Watts?
Thank you. The Budget Subcommittee, we met on Tuesday, October 13th, and staff provided information on the progress of the upcoming multi-year rate proposal. And staff and consultants provided information on the drivers for the proposal, including increasing catastrophic reserve levels, debt service, capital improvement expenditures, and operation and maintenance costs. We have 2 more meetings scheduled, and staff will provide detailed information on the upcoming communications plan and the cost of service study results before the proposal will come to the full board, estimated in early 2021. And that is all.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board or questions for Board Member Watts? Thank you for getting that first meeting going. I know it's a long process, but we appreciate it. So at this time, we are now taking public comments on item number 11, If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha, anyone?
No one at this time.
Thank you very much. That'll take care of item number 11. Item number 12, board member reports. Do we have any?
If this is the appropriate time, I would just like to, this is board member Grable. I would just like to follow up with our previous conversation about possibly establishing a standing subcommittee on recycled water and agricultural water. And I didn't know when the appropriate time would be to propose that for an agenda item or discuss it, but I did want to bring it up just so we're not putting it on the back burner for too long. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, board member Grable. Director Burke, any response or update? I think we've been fairly busy with some other things recently, and I know I've not had any discussions with you, but certainly willing to discuss that.
Yes, so thank you, board member Grable and Chair Galvin. I will get together with our interim legal counsel, and we will discuss the best way to bring this back for board consideration to establish either a standing subcommittee or an ad hoc subcommittee as appropriate, and we'll bring that back to the board.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? All right, we're now taking public comments on item number 12. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9. Secretary Atha?
There are no comments at this time.
Thank you. That'll take care of the board member reports. Director's report, Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin, members of the board. I do have a number of things to update the board on. First, I wanted to let the board know that the Laguna Environmental Laboratory just received their new gas chromatograph mass spectrophotometer instrument, or GCMS. This is the most expensive instrument that the lab has, and it utilizes the latest technology to quantify the amount of volatile compounds in liquid and solid samples. Staff is beginning the development of the methods and proving proficiency for using this instrument for compliance purposes. And the process will take approximately 1 year to get the full accreditation needed to run the samples. The board might recall that earlier this year you approved this purchase, and the lab staff wanted me to pass along their thanks, appreciation, and excitement regarding this new instrument. Only the lab staff would have that excitement. Second, I wanted to provide the board with an update on our participation in the Wyland Foundation Mayor's National Water Conservation Challenge, which was a campaign to have citizens pledge online to make lifestyle changes to encourage water conservation in their daily lives. The final number of pledges by different cities around the country were tabulated, and the results were announced at the end of last month. Our promotion of the challenge was well received, and we were in the top spot for cities with similar population for a couple of weeks. However, we ultimately fell back to 4th place, still a great result for the first time we did this challenge. I want to thank Mayor Schwedhelm, the council, the board, and the communications team for elevating this fun challenge that gave us a unique opportunity to engage the public and promote our water smart programs in a dry year. If anyone was curious, we want to congratulate the city of Lakeland, Florida, as they were the winner for cities in our population category. Wanted to let the board know about our response to the recent glass fire. So local operations was closely monitoring the glass fire as it was approaching the city limits on the evening of September 27th. Staff was coordinating with Santa Rosa Fire prior to opening our local Water Department Operations Center, or DOC. And staff closely monitored our distribution system throughout the event. Due to the previous warning from PG&E of a potential power loss due to the predicted high heat conditions, we had already put together a staffing plan. And so we were able to easily and quickly implement that staffing plan after the glass fire started. Even during the most intense hours of the fire, local operations staff were able to keep all water pump stations operating at maximum capacity in the pressure zones that were impacted by the fire. Thankfully, we never lost communications, and we were able to monitor our distribution system through our SCADA systems. Even with significant firefighting activities occurring, the water distribution system never lost pressure and performed as expected. We did sustain an estimated several $100,000 of damage to some of our infrastructure. Most of the damage consists of damaged fencing around our tanks and pump stations, as well as some damaged trees that we will have to remove from our properties. Our asset management team is working closely with capital projects team to help install soil stabilization measures around our reservoirs where vegetation was burned to ensure the stability of the banks and hillsides around our tanks. We will be working closely with FEMA and Cal OES to seek the maximum amount of reimbursement for any damage to our infrastructure. Water staff has already met with Cal OES and taken them on a field tour to document all of our fire damage. And we will be working with FEMA and Cal OES to develop a public assistance or PA project to seek reimbursement for the necessary repairs. Related to that, we were very cognizant of water quality throughout the glass fire. Based on lessons learned from our experience during the 2017 Tubbs fire, as well as working with experts and our regulators, we have taken precautionary measures and continue to go above and beyond the minimum regulatory requirements for our water system. As an additional precaution in the fire impacted areas, we did go out and flush the water system. We took water quality samples from reservoirs, sample stations, and hydrants. Results show no contamination in our drinking water supply or water mains, as was expected since our system operated throughout the fire. At properties that had been damaged by the fire, water system operators removed the water meter, isolating the damaged properties from our system. We flushed and sampled each water service line. All water quality samples have come back meeting all drinking water standards, and all test results show that our system was not compromised and we didn't have any contamination enter our system. So just wanted to make sure the board was aware. This was a lot of time and effort by the staff, and wanted to make sure the public is reassured that we are continuing to ensure that water quality is safe for all of Santa Rosa that is connected to our system. Information regarding water quality is available on our website, and members of the public can also visit srcity.org/glass-fire-recovery for additional information. That is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Director Burke. Any board member questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none, we'll now take public comments on item 13. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha, anyone?
No hands raised at this time.
Thank you. That will conclude item number 13. We've already announced that item 14 has been postponed. So at this time, we're going to adjourn the meeting. I would ask the board's indulgence if I could read something, please. On September 30th, the city of Santa Rosa and Santa Rosa water family suffered a tragic loss. Daryl Clark, water systems technician with the water department, passed away. Daryl was a valuable member of the Geysers operations team for 12 years, which is responsible for ensuring over 4 billion gallons of recycled water is delivered to the Calpine steam fields each year. His work included design, installation, maintenance, and repair of systems, controls, electrical systems, and pumping stations for the Geysers recycled water system. He maintained and operated industrial motors and pumps to ensure the seamless operation of a large portion of the region's water reuse system. Daryl had a vital role during the Kincaid fire, monitoring the fire's path and updating staff about the integrity of the pipeline. His colleagues describe him as a thoughtful and caring individual who was dedicated to his work and was a resource for information. Daryl had a passion for learning and enjoyed figuring out how things worked. His wealth of information in many topics was always shared with his colleagues. Daryl's great sense of humor brought laughter to his colleagues. He was a valued and important member of the Santa Rosa Water team and will be missed. Our hearts and our thoughts are with Daryl's family. I'm sorely disappointed that I didn't know Daryl, but I would like to adjourn today's meeting in Daryl Clark's honor and memory. With that, we are adjourned. Everybody stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you.